Hey, how are you?
I'm well, Morgan. Pleasure to meet you. Thanks for taking time to chat.
Yeah, where in the world are you?
I'm in Brisbane, Australia at the
Ah,
moment.
I've been there.
And you're in the UK at the moment, I believe?
I am. Yeah.
There we go. There we go. Well, like I said, I really do appreciate you taking time to chat. This documentary was fantastic. I was just so blown away by how much I didn't know, firstly, about Pharrell's life, but just the choice to obviously portray it in the form of Lego animation. And the biggest thing that stuck out to me that I was so captivated by was the depiction of synesthesia in the film. And I'm curious to know what that conversation with Pharrell was like. I would love to know how he described that to you and then what the process of bringing that to life in a visual sense was like.
It was my very first conversation with Pharrell. I mean, once we decided to make the film and I sat down with a tape recorder, we talked about synesthesia, and he talked about that experience of being a boy and sitting in front of his stereo at his parents' living room and listening to records, and that the records would come to life, and that colors would come out of the speakers, and he would talk about the songs that really triggered it, songs like Stevie Wonder songs or the Jacksons or even Steely Dan, things like these rich chords and things. And he told me that whole story. And then the first thing we did making the film is I cut together a little bit of that interview, and we did a little sample test to see if this idea of doing a Lego film was even going to work. And that test is the scene of him sitting there that's in the film, listening to
Oh,
music,
wow.
listening to Stevie Wonder. And we redid the animation, but it's basically the
Sure.
same idea. And that moment of visualizing the synesthesia was kind of like the idea that, this is really going to work, And for me, who comes from documentary, you don't normally, you know, have the ability to visualize something in somebody's imagination in that way. So that was like so liberating. And that was the thing that got everybody excited about making this film because it was an unusual idea to do something like this.
Oh, and it's just so beautiful to look at as well. But I'm curious to know, talking sort of about that blend of animation and documentary filmmaking, noticing things like handheld camera. The one that stuck out to me is when the camera is following Pharrell when he's gone back to where he grew up, and the camera is purposely moving around handheld. You've got focus pulls and stuff. And I'm curious to know about the conscious decisions to animate in things like that. It genuinely feels like a documentary, but like you said, it hasn't been done this way before. So what are those processes like in doing that?
What's interesting because like that scene, I shot that scene and that the shots look the exact same
Oh,
in real
that's
life as
incredible.
they do in animation. So there are things I shot that are just literally translated one to one from real
Oh, that's
life to
awesome.
animation. And then many things we just made up or constructed.
Sure.
But it was one of the big kind of debates we had, because,
Sure.
in animation, the director is God. You can make anything
Mm.
happen. And in documentary, the director has that much power. So, in documentary, you don't always get the shot or can put the camera where you want or get the focus right or, all the mistakes and all the frictions of reality. And so I kept saying to the animators when we started working, we've got to do all this with handheld and we've got to work on all these mistakes and keep them in. And they couldn't really understand what I was saying. I mean, it took us a few
Right.
months for them to finally get it. It's like, no, it has to be wrong because by
Yeah,
being wrong, it's going to feel authentic, and that
it
just
does.
was kind of inconceivable to them. But we had so many discussions about handheld, and even when we started doing our handheld tests, it was all too smooth. And we're like, no, 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 handheld isn't like that. It's like, it's really, and I would
Jumpy and it's
often,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I would even sometimes send, iPhone videos I would shoot, just like little reference videos, just to try and show, or I'd send them clips of things, and we played a lot with all kinds of reference clips of everything, but just
Mm.
trying to get the grammar of the film right. And what
Yeah.
was interesting, and to me, I didn't know how it was going to work, is the film has that gear that feels like a documentary, but then it has this fantasy gear. So when, say, music comes in, kind of anything can happen. The reality in this Lego world disappears. So we can be underwater, we could be outer space, we can do all this stuff. And the happy accident or, design of it was that you don't notice when it goes from one gear to another. Suddenly it can be realistic, and then suddenly somebody starts floating, and because it's all in Lego, you just go with it. And like that was great because I didn't know if that was going to work, but suddenly it all just becomes this, one thing.
It works. As someone who truly loved to see it, it worked. It's such an immersive and unique experience. I'd love to ask about just doing the interviews with everyone who was obviously a part of Pharrell's life. How did you pitch the idea to them that they are going to look like Lego in the film during these interviews, and who had the best reaction when they saw themselves as a Lego person for the first time?
Well, nobody knew we were doing a Lego movie. So, I think we started the project just before the pandemic started. Right. So, first of all, everybody loves Pharrell, all the collaborators. Like, everybody said yes. Like, that actually was as easy as I could have imagined, considering how famous some of these people are. And some of them said, yeah, I'll do it, but it may take 4 months or whatever. But because of the pandemic, a lot of it I did at, remotely on Zoom or some on the telephone. And we just said we're going to do a documentary, but we're going to animate it. And we didn't say what we were going to do. I did tell a couple of people that it was going to be Lego, because the first interview I did was Missy Elliott. And this is the beginning of the pandemic, and I couldn't even send a sound person to her house, so I FedExed her a Zoom audio recorder, and then I had to talk her through how to record herself. So, me producing Missy Elliott, trying to get her to do this. Yeah. And I remember her dog kept coming in and barking, and she said, "Is my dog going to be in Lego?" And so, which I wish I'd gotten her dog in Lego. But then most people didn't really know, and again, we knew it was going to take years, and we just didn't want people to have that in their head. And so then when we showed people their designs, the reactions were universally positive. I mean, awesome. It could have gone a different way, but I kind of feel like, who doesn't want to see themselves in Lego? Like, it's myself included. Like, it's fun to see yourself as a minifig.
I was going to ask as well, what was your reaction to that? But like I said, it's fun, right? It's just such a cool experience to visualize yourself in that way. I'm almost at my time here, Morgan. I'd love to ask, just to wrap up, you've made some incredible documentaries and some really told some really moving stories about people. How often are you yourself inspired by the people you make documentaries about as a filmmaker?
I mean, it's a lot of why I make films about creative people, is that these are things I'm trying to explore as a creative person, So I feel like the questions I ask, and often the questions the movies ask, are questions about creativity and how do you navigate a creative life and stay in touch with the creative instinct and deal with a world that doesn't always honor or respect those things. So, sure. So in a way, even though I've made a lot of films about people, biography, I feel like there's a lot of autobiography in everything. I feel like I see myself in all of these questions. And when I'm making something, I often say the instructions are in the box. Meaning, if we're trying to figure out how to make the film, we just listen to what the subject's saying. So listening to Pharrell talking about this kind of magical realism, or the kind of making no's into yeses and all these ideas, that is how we should make the film. So the film really, in its texture, is reflective, I think, of Pharrell's kind of creative vision, and that was amazing.
I think it was too. Morgan, that's my time. I have 100 more questions. I wish we could do this all day. So thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And this is a beautiful film. So thank you for taking the time to talk about it.
Thanks so much. Great talking to you.